Ryan woke to the smell of burning metal and the taste of blood in his mouth. Heat pressed against his skin like a living thing, and when he opened his eyes, a world swam in fractured color. The wreckage of the shuttle lay scattered across an alien beach glowing beneath twin suns, their pale and amber light painting the sky in hues too vivid to be real. His side throbbed with every shallow breath. Something wet trailed down his ribs, soaking the torn fabric of his uniform, and when he touched it, his fingers came away crimson. "Damn," he rasped, the sound raw in his throat. He pushed himself up, biting back a groan as pain knifed through. His body, one leg felt raw, numb, and heavy, but he dragged it beneath him anyway. Staying in the open was suicide. Already, dark shapes circled the edge of the water, sleek and sinuous, drawn by the scent of blood. Their eyes glowed red when the sunlight caught them. Ryan staggered forward, boots crunching against glassy sand, each step a war against the weight of his own failing body. He aimed for the tree line ahead, dense jungle blooming in colors he'd never seen on any world. Massive fronds shimmering turquoise and magenta, vines glowing faintly like molten threads. The air grew thicker, damp and sweet with the smell of flowers that pulsed with inner light. Every sound was alien. The distant cry of something with too many lungs, the hiss of insects that moved like whispers in the dark. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. One more step, he thought. Just one more. Then another. His knees buckled before he reached shelter, and the ground rose to meet him. He hit the earth hard, breath exploding from his chest in a ragged gasp. For a long moment, there was nothing, just the rhythmic crash of distant waves and the steady rush of his own blood. A shadow fell across him. Soft at first, then solid. Something cool touched his cheek. Not claws, not teeth, fingers. He forced his eyes open. The figure crouching over him was like nothing in his training files. Tall and slender, movements fluid as water, skin the color of twilight with faint luminescent patterns rippling beneath its surface. Her hair, if it was hair, flowed like strands of molten silver, catching the filtered light that spilled through the canopy. Eyes, large and violet, glowed with a depth that made his breath hitch. For a wild second, he thought he'd died, and met some mythic angel. Lyra studied the human with a mix of alarm and wonder. She had never seen one in the flesh, though old treaties spoke of them fragile creatures, born of single suns, quick to fight and quicker to die. Yet here he was, still clinging to life, despite wounds that should have ended him hours ago. His heat startled her. His skin burned against her cool touch, as though fire slept beneath it. Fever, she thought instantly. Infection racing through. His system. She shouldn't be here. The edicts were clear. No interference, no contact. Her people believed mingling with outsiders weakened the spirit. But as she looked down at him, at the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the blood pooling beneath him, she knew walking away wasn't an option. Lyra slid her arms beneath his battered frame and lifted. He was heavier than she expected, solid. Muscle under ruined cloth, but her strength held. She carried him through a curtain of shimmering vines, into a hidden grove where flowers pulsed like living stars and water sang softly in the distance. She laid him gently against the root of a colossal tree and began tearing away the worst of the shredded fabric to reach his wounds. Her hands moved with care, tracing along his ribs, across his abdomen, checking for ruptures, fractures, signs of venom burns. Then her fingers stilled. Her head tilted slightly, silver hair spilling over one shoulder as she stared at the unexpected rise beneath the lower part of his uniform. It was warm, firm, pulsing faintly beneath. Her touch, her brows, drew together in confusion. "What?" she whispered, fingertips brushing the swollen shape again. "Is this swelling?" Ryan stirred, a weak groan escaping his lips. unaware that his fight for survival had just taken a turn into the strangest kind of trouble. Lyra froze, her fingers lingering on the strange rise beneath the human's torn garment. The swelling was hot to the touch, radiating a heat unlike the rest of his fevered skin. Her first thought was infection, a pocket of fluid trapped beneath the flesh. A dangerous rupture. If it spread, it could kill him. Her pulse quickened. She had treated venom stings that turned blood to acid, fractures that split bone like dry wood. But this she had never seen. The swelling seemed alive, as if responding to her touch. That frightened her most of all. The human stirred. A low sound rumbling in his chest, and for an instant she thought his eyes might open. They fluttered, but remained closed. His breath came shallow, uneven. She didn't have time to hesitate. Lyra reached into the satchel slung across her back, pulling out a vial of translucent gel and a strip of woven fiber from the healing trees. If pressure could disperse the fluid, she might prevent a rupture. She coated her hands with the cool gel and placed them gently on the swelling. Intending only to soothe the inflamed tissue dot, it pulsed harder. She stilled, violet eyes narrowing in confusion. The organ, or whatever this was, seemed to react to her, not with pain, something else. Heat flared beneath her palms, and for a flicker of a moment, the human's hips shifted as if in response. Lyra pressed a little more firmly, massaging in small circles the way she would with a deep venom clot. The swelling grew larger. She drew in a sharp breath. That wasn't supposed to happen. What in the moons? She whispered, biting her lip as she worked faster, desperate to contain what she assumed was a runaway biological reaction. If the pressure in this organ burst, would he bleed out internally? Would it poison him? Her mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. The human groaned again, louder this time. His face turned toward her, lips parting, a sound escaping that was closer to a sigh than a cry of pain. "Hold still," she ordered under her breath, misunderstanding the noise for agony. Her hands moved with more urgency, kneading the swelling with expert care, slick with the cooling salve. The texture changed, hardening in ways that baffled her. It was as if the tissue beneath her fingers was adapting. "The fever's worse than I thought," she concluded grimly. She had to work faster. She leaned closer, silver hair brushing against his bare stomach, her cool breath washing over flushed human skin as she applied pressure again and again. The warmth radiating from that region almost burned her palms now. "Stay with me," she murmured, the healer's mantra, even though. He hovered at the edge of waking God. Then it happened. The swelling jerked under her hands, a sudden twitch so violent it startled her backward. She stared, heart pounding, as the fabric strained against what had grown impossibly firm. Her hands trembled. That wasn't infection. That wasn't any injury she knew. Her mind scrambled for an explanation and found none. The human's eyes snapped open, blue, bright and unfocused. He blinked up at her, confusion giving way to something else the instant he realized where her hands were. His voice was rough, thick with exhaustion, and something dangerously close to amusement. "I can explain." Lyra blinked, utterly lost. "Explain what? What is this? This organ, why is it expanding?" Ryan's lips curved into the weakest, most incredulous smile she'd ever seen. "That's not an organ in trouble," he rasped. "That's just biology doing its thing." She froze, the words sliding into her mind like water finding cracks. Realization didn't come, but suspicion did. Her violet cheeks darkened, color blooming across her luminous skin as his meaning sank in slowly, piece by piece. Not a wound, not a rupture, something else entirely. Something tied to reproduction? Her stomach dropped like a stone in deep water. Among her people, Touching such a place was an act of binding sacred, irreversible. And she had just stars. Her hands jerked back as if burned. This words failed her. She had broken every law, every vow drilled into her since birth. And the human, he was smiling at her, teeth flashing despite his pallor. "If this is your idea of first aid," he croaked, "remind me to crash more often." Heat flooded her cheeks, her throat, down to the very tips of her fingers. She wanted to vanish into the earth. Before she could respond, a distant rustle swept through the clearing, the hiss of something sliding through undergrowth, low and predatory. Her head snapped up, silver hair cascading like a river of light. From the shadows, 2 crimson eyes burned, then another pair, and another. Shapes unfurled, sleek bodies weaving between phosphorescent plants. Stalkers, jungle apex hunters, drawn by blood. "Stay down," she whispered, voice taut, as her hand slid to the hilt of her bioluminescent blade. The strange, shameful heat on her palms was forgotten, burned away by the cold promise of death circling the grove. Ryan tried to lift his blaster. His arm shook violently, but his jaw set hard. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," he muttered. Her answer was a whisper of steel as the blade ignited in her grip, casting the jungle in ghostly violet light. "It's worse," Lyra said. And then the night exploded with movement. Asterisk. Ryan blinked hard, trying to clear the haze of fever and adrenaline as violet light danced wildly through the clearing. Shapes lunged out of the foliage, sleek bodies rippling like shadows come alive. The creature's eyes burned crimson, and their teeth razor-thin, needle-sharp flashed whenever they opened their jaws to hiss. The first stalker struck fast, coiling low before launching itself at him. Ryan raised his blaster, but his arm felt like lead, the weapon trembling in his grip. A sharp hum split the air, a blur of motion, and the creature fell in 2 pieces at his feet, ichor glowing like molten gold against the earth. Lyra moved like water, her blade a shard of luminous crystal bound to an elegant hiltsang as it cut the air in arcs that shimmered. Sparks of bioluminescence followed every strike, painting the grove in violet fire. Her silhouette flowed through the darkness, long limbs twisting, silver hair fanning behind her, as if even gravity dared not restrain her. Ryan couldn't help but stare even in the chaos. She was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A dream from a fever that refused to break. Another predator lunged at her flank, jaws wide, but she pivoted, letting momentum carry the creature past her before driving her blade deep into its spine. The hiss turned into a gurgle, then silence. "Move!" Her voice rang out, sharp and melodic at once. Ryan forced his body to obey, dragging himself behind the root of the colossal tree. The stalkers seemed endless, slipping from the undergrowth in a tide of muscle and hunger, but Lyra stood her ground unyielding. For every hiss, there came the hum of her blade. For every flash of fangs, a counterstroke that ended it. When the final creature collapsed, the grove fell into eerie quiet. The glow of their ichor bled into the soil like veins of molten metal. Lyra stood panting lightly, violet skin glistening under the alien moonlight, her blade dripping gold that hissed as it struck the damp earth. Ryan exhaled slowly, lowering his blaster. "Not bad for a fever dream," he muttered hoarsely. She turned to him, luminous patterns across her skin, pulsing like distant stars. Her eyes, those impossibly deep violet eyes, met his, unreadable. Then, without a word, she deactivated her blade and strode toward him. Her expression shifted as her gaze fell to his uniform still open, revealing his bare torso and, unmistakably, the reason for their earlier misunderstanding. Heat climbed, her cheeks in a visible flush that turned the faint glow of her skin into a deep violet blaze. Rain followed her eyes, then groaned, not in pain this time, but in sheer mortification and something dangerously close to laughter. You, still worried about the swelling? He rasped, voice dry as a desert. Lyra froze, fingers curling at her sides. Her people did not speak of such things, not in daylight, not even in private. To touch where she had touched. Among the Valorians, that was a vow, a sacred act binding two souls as one. And she had done it without thought, without permission, not for bonding, but for healing. Her voice was tight when she spoke. Your body confuses me. I thought you were dying. Ryan coughed a laugh that scraped his throat raw. Not dying. Not exactly. His grin tilted, exhausted but genuine. Though, for the record, I've never had a doctor quite so. Hands on. Her brow furrowed, lips parting in something between shock and indignation. That was not. That was a clinical procedure. Sure, he said, amusement flickering in his fever-bright eyes. Clinical. She glared, but the fire in her gaze faltered when his breath hitched and his hand drifted weakly toward his side, smearing blood across already stained fabric. Duty shoved embarrassment aside. She dropped to her knees beside him, fingers brushing. His skin gentler now, hesitant, as if afraid of making another mistake. You've lost too much blood, she murmured, her healer's instinct seizing control. We need to close the wound and bring down your fever before it consumes you. Ryan's head lolled against the tree bark, but his eyes never left hers. You're something else, you know that? His voice was softer now, stripped of humor, the words carrying weight even through the haze. Thought I was done for. Then you showed up, swinging a lightsaber, saving my ass. Her lips twitched despite herself. Lightsaber? Never mind. He tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace as pain shot through his side. His fingers brushed hers light, unintentional, yet enough to make her pulse stumble. The contact sent a strange current racing through her veins. Valorian teachings spoke of soul resonance, a harmony between beings that defied reason. She had dismissed it as myth. Until now, she rose abruptly, hiding the storm in her chest. Stay awake, she ordered, masking tremor with authority. If you fade now, I may not bring you back. He gave a sluggish salute, eyes half-lidded. Yes, ma'am, Lyra turned, reaching for her satchel. Her hands moved fast, crushing luminous herbs, mixing powders into a viscous paste. But her thoughts tangled like wild vines. That heat beneath her fingers. His voice curling around her name when he whispered it in delirium. The way her heart had leapt when their skin touched, an instinct older than law, older than stars. She shook herself hard. Foolishness. She was a healer. This was her patient. Nothing more than came the soft click of a beacon activating near the wreckage. Her head snapped toward the jungle as faint red light pulsed through the foliage. Ryan saw it too, a curse rasping from his lips. They found us. Lyra's blood chilled. Whoever they were, their signal reeked of menace. And she had no idea how much time they had left. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. That pulse of red light flickered like a heartbeat among the shattered wreckage beyond the trees. A beacon, cold and merciless, stabbing through the phosphorescent gloom. Ryan's muscles tensed, though every nerve in his body screamed in protest. That's a locator, he said hoarsely, dragging the words past cracked lips. Someone just pinned us. Lyra turned, her silver hair fanning as she scanned the perimeter. The violet glow of her skin pulsed faster, now not with attraction. This time, but something older, primal, alarm. She had never seen technology like this before, but the intent was clear in the way the light stuttered. Signal. Summoning predators, not the kind that stalked on 6 legs, but ones that walked upright and killed for profit. Ryan tried to push himself up, his blaster trembling in his hand. His entire body shook as if gravity had doubled its weight. "We can't stay here. If that's who I think it is, they won't just kill me, they'll burn this grove to ash. You're in no condition to fight." Her voice was sharp, but under it lurked something raw fear for him, though she would never name it aloud. "Don't have a choice," he said through clenched teeth. "You don't know these people. Vex cartel, they don't negotiate. They erase." Lyra's jaw tightened. She had heard whispers of such things in the long hallways of her world, stories traded like forbidden's fruit, syndicates that spanned the stars, trafficking in blood and terror. She hadn't believed them real until now. "Can you walk?" she asked, even as her healer's gaze swept his injuries. Ryan gave a grim smile. "Define walk." She slid an arm around him, lifting his weight with effortless strength. His body pressed against hers, heat pouring from him like liquid fire, fevered and unsteady, and something inside her shifted an awareness too sharp to ignore. But this wasn't the time to dwell on it. They moved into the trees, deeper into a glowing heart of the jungle. Leaves brushed their skin like whispers, shedding iridescent dust that clung to Lyra's hair like fallen stars. Behind them, the red beacon pulsed faster, hungrier, and then came the sound. Low at first, like distant thunder rolling across some alien plain, then louder. A tremor that shivered up through the roots into her bones. Engines. Multiple. Ryan's grip on her tightened. "Dropships," he rasped. "They're here." The canopy erupted as a sleek black vessel tore through the treetops, scattering leaves like emerald rain. It hit the ground in a storm of dust and thrumming engines, its armored hull gleaming. Like a shard of midnight dot figures spilled out tall, encased in armor streaked with crimson insignia, weapons cradled in hands too eager. Helmets hid their faces, but nothing could hide the intent radiating from their movements. Predators in every sense. Lyra's blade ignited with a hiss, flooding the shadows with a sharp violet glow. The mercenaries hesitated, just for a breath enough to see the creature they faced was no helpless native, but something carved of grace and danger. Ryan stumbled forward, planting himself between her and the advancing line, blaster raised with stubborn resolve. He was pale, trembling, half broken, yet when he spoke, his voice carried steel. "You want what I've got? Come take it." "Fool," she hissed, catching his arm, pulling him back. But his eyes, fever bright, defiant, met hers, and the words died in her throat. The leader of the mercenaries stepped forward, a heavy rifle slung casual as a predator's grin. His helmet retracted with a hiss, revealing scaled skin the color of rust and eyes like coals set in obsidian. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't dripped venom. "Commander Hall," he drawled, voice like oil on steel. "You made this easy. Hand over the package, and maybe I'll make it quick." Ryan spat blood and laughter in equal measure. "Sorry, Vex. Lost my manners. No deal." Lyra's grip on her blade tightened. "Vex," she murmured under her breath, tasting the name like Ashdot. The reptilian eyes slid to her, raking over every inch with cold precision. "And what do we have here? A native, pretty little thing. Tell me, Hale, did you trade secrets for skin?" The words slithered over her like poison, and something deep in Lyra's chest snapped. No more hiding. No more retreat. When the first shot came a white-hot streak of plasma, splitting the air. She was already moving. Her blade sang through darkness, cleaving energy bolts, hurling them back in sprays of violet sparks. Ryan dropped behind a twisted root, firing in short, precise bursts despite the weight dragging on his arm. The grove exploded into chaos. The mercenaries surged forward, guns spitting fire, their boots churning glowing moss to ash. Lyra was everywhere. At once, a storm in silver and light, her blade carving arcs of death through armor and flesh. Sparks danced like fireflies, mingling with the alien stars above. Ryan's vision blurred, but one thing burned through the haze. Her, moving like a dream sculpted in violence and grace, standing between him and everything that wanted him dead. When the last mercenary fell, silence slammed down like a curtain. Only the throb of engines from the grounded dropship remained, pulsing like a dark heart. Lyra stood with her blade lowered, its glow bathing her in unearthly radiance. Her chest rose and fell, slow and steady. Ryan forced himself upright, every joint screaming, and limped to her side. "Hell of a bedside manner," he croaked. She turned her head, meeting his gaze. There was something in her eyes, now something molten, dangerous, alive. "This was only the beginning," she said softly. "They will send more." "Then we run," Ryan said, though he barely had strength to stand. "No," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a vow older than stars. "We don't run. We fight. Together." Ryan managed a weak smile, his breath ghosting against her ear as he leaned in. "Guess I'm in your hands, Doc." Again. Her pulse stuttered not from fear, from something far more reckless. Something her people called soul recognition. And in the shadow of a burning dropship, she realized she would break every law of her world to keep him alive. The jungle still trembled from the violence, smoke curling upward from shattered roots and seared foliage. The air was thick with the stench of scorched metal and something darker, the chemical tang of mercenary blood pooling in luminous rivulets across the moss. Ryan leaned against a tree, chest heaving, his blaster slipping from his grip. Every nerve in his body screamed, but his gaze stayed locked on Lyra. She stood like a statue of light amid ruin, blade dimming to a violet ember as she deactivated it. Her silver hair was tangled with fragments of ash, her skin streaked with glowing blood that wasn't her own. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then the dropship pulsed, a shimmer across its hull, like the twitch of a sleeping predator. Lyra's instincts screamed a warning an instant before the vessel's Coma ray flared to life. A hologram burst into existence, projected above the wreckage in a haze of scarlet and smoke. It resolved into a figure Ryan knew all too well. Scaled, crimson, eyes like molten pits set into a face carved by cruelty. A mechanical implant whirred where one eye should have been, its crimson lens glowing as it fixed on Ryan like a predator scenting blood. "Well," the voice drawled, oily and sharp, vibrating through the clearing. "Commander Hall, still breathing." How inconvenient. Ryan's jaw clenched. "Vex," he rasped, spitting the name like venom. "Ah, so you remember me." The cartel lord's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile, though it held no warmth, only hunger. "You've been busy, killing my men, hiding on this charming little world, and making friends, I see." His gaze slid to Lyra, dissecting her with mechanical precision. Something cold and invasive slithered through that look, and Lyra felt it like grime on her skin. "She's not part of this," Ryan growled. "Oh, she is now," Vex purred. "You've dragged her into a storm she cannot survive. But I'm feeling generous. Bring me what you stole, the genetic payload, and I'll let this place stand." Lyra's heart lurched. "What payload?" she demanded. Ryan's eyes flicked to hers, guilt shadowing the blue. His voice was raw when he said it. "A cure for the Nexus plague, carried in my neural implant." Lyra's breath hitched. She knew the word plague. Whispers of star systems reduced to bone gardens, cities turned to ash by an invisible killer. She had dismissed them as distant myths. But this was real. Vex leaned forward, the flicker of the hologram casting his features in hellish crimson. 12 hours, Commander. Deliver yourself, and the data to the coordinates I'll transmit. Or I unleash something far worse than what you're hiding." Ryan stared at him, teeth bared in defiance. You don't have it. The strains. Locked. Without the cure, your weapon kills everyone, including you. The reptilian laugh that followed was a sound born of pits and knives. You think I won't burn with the galaxy? I have no need for mercy. Only control and fear. Commander Fear is already mine. The hologram snapped out, leaving a silence sharp enough to cut. The only sound was the slow drip of glowing blood. From a shattered leaf, Ryan sagged back against the tree, breath hitching. He's not bluffing, he said quietly. If he weaponized the Nexus strain, every world in this sector is at risk. Lyra felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Her people had shunned the stars for centuries, building lives in isolation to avoid contagion of war and greed. And now that darkness had clawed its way to their sacred soil. We can't run, Ryan said, reading the thought etched in her eyes. If he spreads that plague, this planet's gone. Your people, your forests, your seas dead. Then we fight, Lyra replied, though the tremor in her chest betrayed the enormity of what she was saying. But not as we are. You're too weak. I'm not enough. Her gaze drifted toward the east, where the canopy shimmered faintly with a silver mist. Beyond that mist lay the pools of communion waters older than memory, where her people whispered of bonds forged between souls and flesh, where life could change its shape. She had always dismissed the rituals as tradition draped in myth. Now they were the only hope clawing at her mind. There is a way, she whispered, almost to herself. Ryan's head lifted, his eyes glassy with exhaustion. Tell me. The luminous pools, she said, her voice steadying as she gave the thought breath. They amplify essence, fuse life threads. It is how my ancestors strengthened themselves for war. Her throat tightened. But the ritual demands more than blood. It requires a joining, a surrender of barriers. Ryan blinked slowly, processing through fever haze. Then, with a rough laugh, he rasped, You're saying what I think you're saying? Her violet cheeks flushed dark, but her chin lifted in defiance of her own shame. It is the only way. The bond would merge our strength, our instincts, enough to challenge Vex. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant roar of a dropship engine climbing into the clouds. Ryan met her gaze tired, blood-streaked, but burning with something raw and human. Then what are we waiting for? Lyra's breath caught. She had expected resistance, fear, even revulsion. Not this quiet, reckless acceptance. It ignited something deep inside her, a spark older than stars, now fanned to a blaze. Once begun, she warned softly, it cannot be undone. Ryan managed a faint, crooked grin. Neither can what's coming. Let's make sure we live to regret it. The vow curled between them like smoke and fire as she slipped an arm beneath his shoulders, lifting him once more. Her skin hummed where it touched his, her pulse a drum against her ribs. As they vanished into the silver mist, the jungle whispered with the sound of unseen things waking, as if the very world sensed the shift about to unfold. The pools awaited still, luminous, older than law. And in their depths, something more, dangerous than Vex's plague stirred. A choice that would bind two lives, two species forever. Asterisk. The jungle thinned into silence as they pushed deeper into the silver mist, the chaos of burning metal and mercenary screams fading behind them. Here the air was heavy and sweet, humming with unseen energy. The ground sloped toward a hollow, where light pooled like liquid fire, and Ryan realized he was looking at something that shouldn't exist, at least. Not outside a dream dot, the pools of communion shimmered under the twin suns like mirrors of molten starlight. Their surfaces pulsed with a heartbeat of their own, ripples glowing in hues of blue and silver that made the surrounding foliage blush in response. Strange blossoms floated on the water, their petals curling with a slow, almost sensual rhythm. The place was alive, ancient, and watchful. Lyra paused at the edge, her bare feet sinking into luminous moss. Her blade hung at her side, unlit now, as though even its power dared not break the sanctity of this place. She eased Ryan down onto a bank of iridescent vines, their glow brushing his skin with ghostly warmth. He tilted his head back, staring up at the towering canopy above, where vines spiraled like veins through a living sky. Every breath burned. In his lungs, every nerve screamed exhaustion, but his mind clung to one truth. Whatever happened here, it was all they had left. Lyra knelt beside him, her violet eyes bright in the surreal glow. "Once we begin," she said softly, "there is no separation. Not of flesh, not of spirit. Our essences will interlace." Ryan tried to smile, though it came out crooked. "You make it sound like marriage." Her throat tightened. Among her people, it was more than that. This was binding beyond law, beyond death. But words would not carry meaning across such a gulf. "It is survival," she said simply, though something inside her whispered it was far more. Her hands hovered over his chest, trembling in a way they never had in battle. The healer in her wanted to think clinically, to see this as ritual, nothing more. But the woman in her, the one who had touched him, fought for him, felt the gravity of what she was about to do, pulling her down like a tide. Ryan's fingers brushed hers, weak but sure. "Hey," he murmured, voice rough. "If this is what it takes, I'm not afraid." Her breath caught. For all his fragility, his body broken and burning with fever, there was no fear in him, only resolve, and something softer flickering beneath. She nodded once, then began to strip away the remnants of his torn uniform, layer by ruined layer, until the firelight of the pools kissed bare human skin. She shed her own armor with hands that no longer trembled. The cool air whispered over her violet form, tracing the glowing patterns along her limbs like molten ink. Ryan stared, not with crude hunger, but with a kind of stunned reverence that made her pulse stutter. The water lapped at their feet, warm and alive, as if welcoming them. Lyra guided him into the pool, cradling his weight as they sank into its silver glow. The liquid clung like silk, flowing over them in rivulets that shimmered where skin met skin. Energy stirred immediately, a low thrum that pulsed through the cinder, water, and into their bones. Lyra felt it first, a shiver that started in her spine, blossomed outward like fire, threading through her veins until every nerve burned with light. She gasped as the current leapt between them, binding, braiding, searing something new into existence. Ryan felt it too, a tidal surge crashing through his body, burning away weakness, fusing his breath with hers. His heartbeat sensed to a rhythm older than galaxies, pounding against her chest as his hands found her waist, anchoring to the only real thing in this dreamscape of light and heat, her. The ritual demanded closeness more than closeness. It demanded surrender. The pool's glow flared as they gave it, bodies folding together in a dance that was part instinct, part desperation, and something deeper neither had the courage to name. The water boiled with light as the joining deepened, heat spiraling into a crescendo that shook the leaves overhead. When the current finally ebbed, the silence that followed was not empty but alive, humming with the aftermath of transformation. Ryan clutched the edge of the pool, dragging in a breath that felt different. His veins glimmered faintly beneath his skin, bioluminescent patterns blooming like constellations. Strength surged where weakness had lived, and his senses sharpened until he could hear the pulse of the jungle itself. He turned to Lyra and froze. Her glow burned brighter than any star, but threaded through it now were veins of human warmth. The hard lines of her body softened by something new, something shared. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the truth. They weren't two anymore. They were one woven at the root. Then movement shattered the stillness. A scream split the air, a roar of engines, the crack of branches breaking as a second cartel. Dropship tore through the canopy. Figures spilled out in waves of black and crimson, weapons blazing arcs of fire that seared the silver mist. Ryan surged from the pool, every muscle alive with power, the water cascading off his glowing skin. Lyra rose beside him, her blade igniting with a sound that was almost a song, its violet fire now streaked with gold. The mercenaries froze for a fraction of a breath, staring at beings they didn't recognize. Something fused of human grit and alien grace, standing like war-given flesh. Then hell opened. Ryan moved first, faster than any man had a right to plasma fire hissing past as he closed the gap, tearing a rifle from an armored grip and crushing it like paper before driving a fist into the mercenary's chest with enough force to crumple bone. Lyra spun through the storm, her blade a ribbon of molten light, carving arcs of death through the smoke. The jungle became a war song. Plasma shrieks, steel cries, the roar of men who realized too late they had become prey. And through it all, Ryan and Lyra moved as one thought flowing into thought, strike into strike, their bodies guided by a rhythm that pulsed in shared blood. When silence finally fell, Vex stood alone amid the ruin of his forces, his scales dulling as the plague gnawed through his marrow. He staggered forward, spitting venom and hate. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped. "You've only made yourselves a weapon for me to take." Ryan stepped in front of Lyra, his glow pulsing like a storm contained in flesh. "You're done, Vex. The cure's not just a cure anymore. It's evolution, and it's ours." The reptilian eyes widened as understanding struck. "You merged." "Species? Call it chemistry," Ryan said, his grin like a blade. Lyra moved then, swift as a whisper. Her blade sang one final note, and Vex's head toppled into the luminous. Moss. Silence. Real this time. No engines. No screams. Only the slow murmur of the pools behind them, glowing brighter than ever, as if bearing witness to something the stars would soon learn. Ryan turned to her, breath fogging the cooling air. Her violet skin gleamed with their shared light, her hair silvered with starlight and steam. He cupped her face in trembling hands. "You okay?" Lyra smiled, and in that smile lived the ruin of every law she'd ever obeyed. "More than okay," she whispered. "We are infinite now." He kissed her then hard, raw, unbroken by fear, and the glow between them flared, casting their shadows long across a jungle reborn, in the light of two lives rewritten. Far above, the sky split with the sound of approaching ships, not cartel this time, but alliance signals, drawn by the dying beacon of Vex's fleet. History was coming, and in its heart stood a human and an alien, their hands entwined, their bodies humming with power, their bond more dangerous than any weapon forged by war. Because it wasn't just survival anymore. It was the birth of something. Luminous. Something the galaxy could never undo. *, the end.